Good day. My name is Marius Pretorius. Part of my job is involvement with companies experiencing decline. So often after presentations of a specific company's turnaround situation, the companies ask me for material or slides. What I decided to do is to make this short presentation, which normally is an hour presentation, that we compressed into about 15 minutes, to contain only the core ideas of turnaround situations and the selection of turnaround strategies associated with the specific turnaround situations. I'm sure that you will understand that the idea is not to make a seriously professional video or presentation, but rather to give the essentials that people are looking for. So let's see how this can work for us.
The turnaround strategies that we are talking about requires us to understand that the strategies that Porter gave us, namely the low-cost strategy, the broad differentiation strategy, the focused differentiation strategy, focused low-cost strategy, and then other people added some combinations thereof to make best cost provider strategies. They are insufficient for us to use in a turnaround situation. Conventional thinking suggested to us that a business will slide down the failure slide from performing well, moving to underperformance, then eventually in distress and in crisis, and if it cannot be turned around, it has to be dissolved. But we know that this is insufficient for us to understand turnaround situations. We know that turnaround situations often appear suddenly and leadership has to respond. So what is a turnaround situation and how can we use it to select strategies? So from this definition, we can see that a turnaround situation is any one point in time that can happen to a company easily and quickly. Turnaround situations are also sometimes very complex, made up of several preconditions that exist at the same time, and they are different for all turnaround situations and between companies. The literature also suggests that turnaround situations are known as turnaround events. All companies experience turnaround situations in one form or the other. If we just think about small business failure, which is suggested at over 70% in the first 5 years of the life cycle, we know that all of those must have faced a turnaround situation of some other proportion. Turnaround situations are also interpreted by leadership. So leadership is most important, and no wonder that the main cause of business failure is often referred to as failure at the top, which purely suggests that it's the inability of leadership to read the turnaround situation and choose the correct turnaround strategies. Although leadership is not the focus of this presentation, but rather the interpretation of the next two factors which makes up the turnaround situation. So the two key drivers in the new thinking about turnaround situations are firstly resource munificence, which refers to the availability of resources, which can either be scarce or abundant. Or sometimes it ranges from scarcity to abundance, and it is somewhere in between and often hard to determine. And it's a mistake to think that when you have abundant resources, you cannot have a turnaround situation. These resources are not only financial resources, but may also include capacity, capital for human resources, productivity of the organization, and staff ability to respond. And it's influenced by the size of the organization. The second determinant is causality. This refers to the origin of the cause. Does it originate internally or externally? Under internally, we think about operational inefficiencies and anything that can cause a decline from inside the organization. Where from the external sources, we refer to as strategic origin. It is forced upon the organization. They have no choice. It's because the environment is changing that we have that situation. If we think about resource munificence, we see abundance and scarcity over two quadrants of a matrix. If we look at causality, we see that it can be either internal or external, which is the strategic situation which we just referred to. So which of these strategies or turnaround situations should we now look at? The question that arises most of the time is, how do we determine whether the causality is internal or external? And for that we have to answer two questions. One, do you need to reconsider your positioning? And if so, then it indicates to us that the causality is external. The second question is, does the cause of the distress erode the competitive advantage? And if so, we would think that mostly the causality is again from a strategic perspective. If you answer no to both of these questions, then it suggests to us that the problems originate from internally in the organization. This leads us then to a four-quadrant matrix, where each quadrant represents a turnaround situation with different preconditions, and it's broadly named as, firstly, underperformance, which is characterized by scarce resources and internal or operational inefficiency. The second quadrant is where the business is performing well, where there is normally abundant resources despite inefficiencies, or even sometimes invisible inefficiencies that's not known to the leadership at that point. The third quadrant is named strategic distress, which is broadly characterized by sufficient resources, but a change in the environment, forcing demand away from the firm's products. And finally, the crisis situation, which is often only a more serious case of strategic distress, because in this case there is a shortage or scarcity of resources.